Hey guys, happy Friday. Sorry I'm not here with you today. Happy Halloween too. So I want everybody to be safe and be careful this weekend. But first thing I want to do is point out to you guys, hopefully you've already made it here into the weekly agenda and clicked on this link right here and gotten to this video that we're watching right now. So we're going to go through the 5 methods of solving quadratic equations together real quick. And then the substitute has a worksheet that after you complete this note sheet that we're going to do together, they'll give you this worksheet. It is also in Go Formative, so you can type in your answers and see if you're getting right or wrong answers. And I wanted to point out to you the other thing is that the concept check over the quadratic formula, which is what we covered on Wednesday, that's going to be on Monday because I wanted to be able to answer homework questions before you take the concept check. And I was afraid that you might have questions and need to talk about that before you took the concept check. So we're going to put that off till Monday. So just go through the notes with me today and then work on your assignment. And hopefully starting these 5 methods will start getting easier and easier as we start doing more problems. So, all right, if the substitute hasn't passed this around to you yet, make sure you just wait and get yours from the sub. So this says methods for solving quadratic equations. Directions. Solve the equation below using each method. If a method can't be used, explain why. So this is a quadratic equation. We know that it is. It's a trinomial. And the first way that we're going to solve it is by graphing. And remember, when we graphed this thing, I let us put it in Desmos, okay? So I kind of let us do the really easy way out and let us put it in Desmos. So we're just going to make a table, and then I'm going to get the important points that we need to get out of Desmos. So x squared plus 6x plus 5. So we're going to go in here and do x squared plus 6x plus 5. Okay, so here's our parabola. And we talked about this. So our zeros are at -5 and -1. So there's our solutions. But in order to be able to graph it, we definitely want to put the vertex on there. The vertex is at -3, -4. So we're going to graph all this stuff. This is also the y-intercept. It's not really important, except we can put it on our graph so that our parabola is a little better. But we definitely want to have the zeros and the vertex. So let's go get them in our table. So they were at -5 and the y was a 0. So it won't let me zoom in anymore. So I'm zoomed in as much as I can zoom in. -5 and 0, and then -1, 0. And the vertex always falls in between there. So -3, -4 was the vertex. Hope I have those in the right place. Okay, and this is what our parabola looks like. Okay, and so our solutions are where the y equals 0 or where the graph crosses the x-axis, there and there. So if we write them as a solution set, we do -5, -1. Okay, we're going to solve this same one by factoring now. So let's do x squared plus 6x plus 5 equals 0. Remember, when we solved by factoring, we had a chart, and the top of the chart said set equal to 0. The second step said find the GCF. And then the third step said from there, if it's a binomial, check for the difference of 2 squares. And if it was a trinomial, then if a equals 1, we could use that shortcut. And if a does not equal 1, then we have to use the AC method. Okay, so here's our factoring information if you want to write any of that down. This is a trinomial, and it's a trinomial where a equals 1. Remember, a is the number in front of the x squared, and a equals 1. That means I get to use the shortcut. The shortcut method was that you're going to set up 2 sets of parentheses because remember, factoring is the opposite of foiling. Oh, first of all, I set it equal to 0. It's set equal to 0. Check for GCF. This one does not have a GCF. So we move right to trinomial where a equals 1. So we need two numbers that multiply to 5 and add to equal 6. Okay? Multiply to C and add to B. Okay, here's A, here's B, and here's C. So this is X, and then these two numbers that multiply to 5 and add to 6. I'm going to use 5 and 1 because 5 times 1 is 5 and 5 plus 1 is 6. So this is plus 5 and plus 1. Now to actually solve from this state, I'm not done. You can't stop here, okay? You found your factors. We're in factored form, but now we actually need to set each factor equal to 0 to be able to solve, okay? So when I set each of them equal to 0, to solve this one for x, I subtract 5. To solve this one for x, I subtract 1. And I get -5 and -1, which is good. That's the same thing I got when I graphed it and put it into Desmos. Only here is the version of doing it by factoring. Okay, let's move on up and let's talk about solving it by square rooting. Well, if we were in class together, I would say, can we solve this one by square rooting? Like, what's the deal with square rooting? How come we can't or cannot solve this one by square rooting? Well, and I hope you're thinking to yourself, we can't solve this one by square rooting, Miss Reynolds, because it has a B term. X squared plus 6x plus 5 equals 0. This is a B term, okay? It cannot be solved by square roots because there is a B term. Okay, so we can't solve it by square rooting. Okay, the only time we can square root is if this term does not exist. All right, so let's keep moving. Let's go ahead and solve it by completing the square. We know we can solve it by completing the square. We can always solve by completing the square. It's just sometimes it's easier than other times. So when I go to complete the square, this is, let's write it down, x squared plus 6x plus 5 equals 0. Okay, so step number 1 in completing the square is to move the c term over to the other side. So x squared plus 6x equals -5. Okay, I'm going to subtract it over to the other side. I have to get it out of my way because I need to form a perfect square trinomial in here so that I can factor my perfect square trinomial. And remember, the biggest thing to remember with completing the square is the way that we complete the square is we take b over 2 squared and add it to both sides. Okay, b over 2 squared and add it to both sides. So for this one, my b is a 6. So 6 over 2 squared is 3 squared, which is 9. Okay, so I'm going to add 9 to both sides like this. And now my next step is to factor this perfect square trinomial. It factors into x something and then x something, and that's the same thing squared. And remember, this number right here is always going to be what you get right before you square it, okay? What you're going to get right before you square it. So this is x plus 3 squared equals -5 plus 9 is 4. Okay, so step number 4 is to square root both sides. So now I'm going to go back in. Actually, step 4 was to factor the trinomial. Step 5 is to square root both sides, if you're following along in your notes with me about how to solve these. So square root both sides. The reason we do that is because the square root and the squared cancel each other out on the left, and I get x plus 3 equals. And then on the right, I need to simplify the square root of 4. Well, 4 is a perfect square, but I always need to remember both versions of it. So this is plus or minus 2. So then I'm not quite done because it doesn't say x equals yet. So I need to subtract the 3. So x equals -3 plus or minus 2. And let's separate this and get our two answers. -3 plus 2 is -1, and -3 minus 2 is -5. So there's how we solve that same equation by completing the square. I get -5 and -1. All right, let's do it one more way. Let's do it by quadratic formula, and then we will have solved it all the different ways except for by square rooting, which we can't do because it has a b term. Okay, so let's do it by square rooting, quadratic formula. Okay, remember the quadratic formula, x equals the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So if I'm solving x squared plus 6x plus 5 equals 0 by the quadratic formula, a equals 1, b equals 6, and c equals 5. So here we go. X equals the opposite of b, -6, plus or minus the square root of 6 squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2a, which is 2 times 1. So that's -6 plus or minus the square root of, this is 36. Remember, this number will never, ever be negative. It'll always be a positive number. And then I'm going to count my signs. It appears I only have one minus sign, so this is going to be negative. 4 times 1 times 5 is 20, all over 2, which gives me x equals -6 plus or minus the square root of 36 minus 20 is 16, all over 2. The square root of 16 I know is 4. So this is -6 plus or minus 4 over 2. So now if I'm going to break this into my two solutions, I'll move up just a little bit here. Break this into my two solutions, okay? I get -6 plus 4 over 2 and -6 minus 4 over 2. -6 plus 4 is -2 over 2, which is -1. -6 minus 4 is -10 over 2, which is -5. So once again, solving the same equation using the quadratic formula, I get -5 and -1. Okay, quadratic formula works every single time. You can always use it. Completing the square always works, but it's certainly easier if b is an even number. So it's easier when b is even. That's when I would choose to use it, okay? Remember here, big kicker right here, you're going to need this on the worksheet. A has to equal 1. Don't forget step 2 because there's one of them on the worksheet where the A does not equal 1. Now, we did a few in our notes like that. So if you need to look back at the notes for an example of that, you can look back there. Square rooting is really, really nice, but we cannot always square root. We can't square root if there's a B term, right? So remember here, no B term for square roots. No B term. Factoring is great, but every polynomial doesn't factor, so it does not work. Okay, every polynomial does not factor. And graphing is really, really nice as long as the solutions are real. As long as they're not imaginary, we can look at it in Desmos and get the solutions. But Desmos doesn't show us the imaginary solutions. So, okay, you guys have a worksheet that says 3.8 practice that you can pick up now that we've done this. You can pick that up from the substitute. And I want you guys to work on it. You can work together. You can talk together. Just keep your noise level down. Try to get the solutions. And I did put it into GoFormative so that you could check your answers in GoFormative and make sure you were getting the right answers. So you can get immediate feedback while you're working on it in class today. What you don't finish of it in class today is homework. So, and we don't want homework on Halloween weekend. So work hard. I know you guys can do this. I'll be back on Monday and we'll talk about it then. I hope with lots of work done on this worksheet. Talk soon. Have a safe, happy Halloween. Bye-bye.